Well, hello, welcome again to our reading of selections from Herodotos, and we're in Book 1, Chapter 82, and I got up to Section 4 of Chapter 82. Son themenai tauta ap ala sonto. Now, the story up to here was that the poor old Croesus is sent off for various allies, including Sparta. But now we get this digression that Sparta's having a fight with the Argives over various pieces of land, and they decide to fight, but rather than both armies fighting in full, they choose 300 men from each side, and they're going to fight, and then the rest of the army is supposed to return home so that they don't render aid to if they happen to see their own men being defeated. So we begin with this. Having agreed on these things, they separated. They each went off to their own place. They separated. Logades, this is chosen men, connected with that leg root of lek, in our word select, the logades. So chosen men from each side, having been left behind from hupalepo, aorist passive here, participle, they engaged, so they fought. Genitive absolutes, and them fighting, so while they were fighting and literally being equally matched, isopaleon, three from the 600 men, 3 of them, well, we would say survived, were left standing, hupaleponto. Of the Argives, on the one hand, there was Alcinor, Tekai, and also Chromios. And of the Spartans, there was Orthiades. Now, genitive absolute here. So night having come. So when night fell, these ones were left standing. Literally, they were left behind. So we might say they were left standing. Hoimen de duo, those 2 of the Argives, hos nenikekotes, well, it's hos plus a participle here. It's almost thinking that they had prevailed, they had conquered. So as having conquered, Ethion, they were running back to Argos from Theo. They ran back to Argos, but the Orthiades, from among the Spartans, even though he's the only one left, skouliusas, well, this is a verb skouliuo, aorist participle, having stripped the corpses of the Argives. This is a word used specifically for stripping the corpse of the enemy. So having stripped the corpses of the Argives, and Prospheresas, having conveyed to Hopla the weapons to his own camp, ente taxi eke hiaton. Literally, he held himself at the post, at his position, presumably back on the battlefield, although it does say he took them back to his own camp, but then it says he held himself in his position, presumably on the battlefield. Hamera de Deutera, on the second day, of course the first one being the day of battle, so on the next day almost, on the second day, both sides, perceiving, realizing what had happened, paresan, they were present. Theos men de autoi hekateroi efesum necum. Meanwhile, they, each side themselves, in fact, said they had conquered. Legontes hoi men. So one group, that is going to be the Argives, saying that plunes, for pleones, that more of themselves, so more of their own men, had survived, because they had 2 compared with the Spartans 1. So saying that more of their side had survived, but the other lot, that's the Spartans, apophinontes, well, it's literally revealing the other group having fled. So it's something like having pointed out that the other pair fled, but their own man having remained behind, and having stripped the corpses of that lot, that is the Argives. So one lot said, well, more of our men survived, and the other one pointed out those other group having fled, and their own man who had remained behind and had stripped the corpses of the Spartans. Telos de ectes eridos sum pesontes emaconta. This is very almost typical Herodotus. It's slightly amusing here. So finally, as a result of this argument, having engaged from Sumpipto, having attacked, they began to fight. Pesonton decai amphoteron polone, genitive absolute, and many from both sides having fallen from Pipto, the Spartans, enikon, imperfect from nikao, began to prevail. Now we get this weak nun here, it's enclitic, notice, so this is that sort of more like then. So then the Argives, from this time, katakaraminoi, having shaved their heads, proteron, so previously, this is from komao, wearing their hair long, epanankes, by compulsion, under compulsion. So previously they'd worn their hair long under compulsion. They made for themselves a law and a kat arain. Well, this is a curse. So something like added to it a curse. Now may proteron, and then the proteron goes with the prin, so we don't translate it here at this point. They made a law and a curse that none of the Argives, now we get a future infinitive here from trepho. So trepho is an interesting word, originally threpho, and then Grassmann's law says you've got to deaspirate the first tor, so you get trepho, which is the word you learn, and because this is a future infinitive, the phi has turned into a psi, and then the aspirate reappears back in the tor. So they made a law and a curse that none of the Argives would literally rear their hair, that is, we would say grow their hair long, nor would their women, for them, cruciferesen, wear gold. So nor would their women wear gold, and then the proteron prin until anasosontai, they might recover. This is a subjunctive here, until they might recover thuria. Lacedaemonia ta enantia, two-tone. So the Spartans laid down a law, the opposite of these things. Not growing their hair long, pro tuto, before this time, but after this time, command to grow their hair long. So this is typical Herodotus story here to explain why the Spartans grew their hair long, which they continued to do, and indeed later in Athens it became the fashion for young conservative men who admired the Spartans to grow their hair long. Anyway, so that's what a little explanatory story here that Herodotus loves to put in. Ton tehena legusi ton perilephthenta tone tria conturn. They say that the one having been left of the 300, Orthiades, they say that him being ashamed, aponosteon, to return home to Sparta, and then we get a genitive absolute. Those are sulokiteon. This is sulokites, but first declension, I think. So these are the men of his company. So his fellow companymen for him, hoi for auto, having perished. So because all of his fellow countrymen perished, he was too ashamed to return back to Sparta. And they say him autu there, at that place. Katakresastha hiauton, it's a word meaning to do himself in. So he killed himself in Thuria. So that was a sad end to poor old Orthiades, who was in fact the only one of the Spartans who survived. And that's the end of chapter 82.